Welcome to Media Storm, the news podcast that starts with the people who are normally asked last.
I'm Helena Wadia.
And I'm Mathilda Mallinson. Last week, we were joined in the studio by Charlie Craggs, who helpfully suggested that Helena and I fund our journalism with an OnlyFans account called News with Nudes.
We could do a sexy cover up with newspaper and then pull each newspaper away.
We could do a naked calendar.
Burlesque newspaper.
The Sun headline pasted across the nipples.
That's actually quite a good idea.
Oh my god.
God, maybe we could make a career out of this.
I mean, it's amazing to see how well you've done since first hearing about it. You've done fucking killing it.
Thanks.
It doesn't always feel like
it
that.
doesn't feel
no,
like
you
it.
Really are.
This
You
is
really
the
are.
Feels like treading water a lot.
Yeah.
Even people outside of my kind of echo chamber of the people I think would know it. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, yeah, you're doing really, really well. That's how you know when you're doing good.
Okay. So we've just got to beg some more people for money.
But I'm not just here to ask you to sponsor us on Patreon for just £3 a month by clicking on the link in the show notes. No, there's something much more important. On last week's episode, Helena investigated and clearly laid out the facts around Scotland's gender recognition bill and the debate that has unfolded since. And then we spoke with Charlie about the transgender narratives dominating today's debates and how coloured these are by fear. This has not always been the case. So where has it come from? Why now? And who is it helping? Fear often comes from the unknown, which is why it's so important to listen to the people being painted into pariahs. At Media Storm, we platform those spoken about in the news all the time, but never spoken to. This is their right of reply, so thank you for joining us this bonus week for transgender rights and the real threats to women.
This whole trans women are a threat to women, I hadn't heard that. I transitioned 10 years ago now, and I hadn't heard that until 6 years into my transition. I'd never heard a woman think of me as a threat or any discourse about it in the media. And bear in mind, I'd been working in the media up until that point. I never ever had any issue, was never asked any questions about that in media stuff. Now it's literally all I ever do. And the shift of being in the street, the abuse I'd get would always be from yobby straight guys, football hooligan types, lads, roadmen types. Now, the more shit I get in the street is, and definitely online and in the media, is from women. It's mind-blowing because I could never have predicted that. It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. Women have always been my only friends. I've never had guy friends. Women have been my safe space. Women are the reason I'm literally still here today. I would have killed myself a long time ago if it wasn't for the few friends I had at a time in my life where I was in an all-boys school, a rough all-boys school, growing up on a rough council estate, even in my family, with boyish boys. And it blows my mind. I'm just we're not your enemy. We've never been your enemy. You've never been our enemy. Why is now this, everyone getting dragged into this massive thing?
There's something to this that I actually feel there's an extent to which women are being exploited by this narrative.
Yes.
There's already reasons to be cautious, to be afraid in your day-to-day life as a woman. And now we're being told that we need to fear all of these phantom threats as if they're immediate dangers to our very existence. And this narrative is serving really cynical agendas. Actually, our first episode of this season was on far-right radicalization. And I spoke to reformed neo-Nazis, to people who've been groomed online, people who've been undercover. And it seems that far-right recruiters are actively using this narrative, this emotive debate about transgender rights, and using that to recruit cis women, because the far right have recognized that they've been a very male-dominated movement. And in order to have legitimacy, in order to continue to the next generation, they need to recruit women. And one of the single most useful narratives to far-right radicals recruiting women to their movements is news about transgender rights. So whether it's serving far-right radicals, whether it's serving tabloid press that are making, clickbait capital from it, or whether it's serving political groups that want to distract people from, the cost of living crisis and scare them into voting for them. At the end of the day, women are being exploited as well by being made to fear things that they don't need to fear. And it's just, you're right. The affinity, the allyship is so much more prominent than this supposed threat we're being told now has to turn us into an us and them movement.
And it really is an us and them thing. Like a woman, if they're reading a reputable source, and maybe if they don't have like trans people or many LGBT people in their life or in their circles, if you read a headline that's like, do you want men in your bathrooms? Of course they're going to say no. And then they're almost being told that, you're on our side then. And it's like, well, guess what? I don't want men in my toilets either. I would have so much less issue if they were to be like, can we just make some trans toilets? Like, and that's still like segregation, but I would... Why are they saying I have to be in the men's?
No,
like, do you want me to be beaten up?
Okay.
Do you want me to be murdered? Do you want me to be raped again? Because I will be. And I will also be sucking off all your husbands. I really hope you leave this in, because I promise, I make a vow. I've said on Instagram, if this goes through and all of a sudden we're having to be using the men's toilets.
I'm going to be sucking off your husband.
Not your, I'm going to have a thing where women who are on side can apply for a card for their husband's wallet so that he can show the card and be, but I doubt he'll show it, but he'll be exempt from being like cheated on. I'm going to ruin all your lives if you ruin mine. I have nothing to live for. If you're going to make me use the men's toilets where I'm making a joke, but I will be in massive danger.
No, I can see the
danger.
Fear and...
Mad, yeah.
And I think that a lot of the negative language around the transgender community in the press comes from the fact that the coverage is disproportionate. The trans community are still less than 1% of the population. And I think that is important to remember. Yet they are still painted as this like new, scary concept. And I really remember when I was younger, one of the things that helped me understand what a gay person is or what a lesbian person is was learning about the history of homosexuality and knowing that many gay people have like existed for many years. And that's the same as the trans community. Like trans people have existed forever.
As a trans person, you just feel like, why can't people see this? You feel like you're going crazy almost. What you said about the kind of far right and their intervention is very, very, very clear when you look on Twitter, and even on things like, there was a study on TikTok where they set up the account as a woman and as a man and just did scrolling without actually like looking for anything to see what rabbit holes they naturally are pushed down with algorithms, and how often it was leading towards far right things. For men, it would be more like the Andrew Tate stuff, but for women, they'd be pushing them down the transphobic route.
So in the main episode for this topic, go back and listen to it, listeners, we talk about this headline where a student apparently identifies as a cat. Spoiler alert, no student identified as a cat, but this was reported across mainstream outlets. The scary thing is it started off building traction by far-right outlets, and that migrated into mainstream spaces and made it onto the BBC. And so what we are actively seeing here is evidence that fictional far-right narratives are making their way into the mainstream, that the extremism is becoming mainstream, and it's something we need to be really on guard for.
Are you gonna tell the story?
Only a few weeks ago, Helena and I were in Parliament.
Okay, tell the story.
We were speaking in Parliament about misogyny in the media, and there was absolutely no mention of anything to do with transgender rights in the conversations that had been had. And there was this MP sitting to the left of me. As soon as they opened the floor to questions, they said, does anyone have any questions? She just started speaking. She didn't have a question. She just wanted to insert into the conversation that if we're talking about misogyny, I think it's really important to mention that sex-based rights have a role to play, and that women need to feel safe and to feel that their territory isn't being encroached upon. Her tone, it felt very aggressive. And then later on, a visiting MP from New Zealand had a question to ask. But she said, just first, I want to respond that the threat here being discussed was not the transgender community. Before she'd even finished her sentence, this MP lashed back and she stormed out of the room.
Media storm.
She media stormed out of the room.
Hashtag media stormed.
Helena breathed for the first time in about 25 minutes. And yeah, but this, I mean, in the context of this, the transgender lobby that we see in the media, this was not someone who was reacting in defense of having been attacked by some angry mob. This was someone who inserted herself into the space to derail a valid conversation and steer it towards this binary, heated debate in which a conversation about domestic abuse had become about transgender people.
It's wild to me because when I transitioned, the first thing my mum said, who's super accepting, was like, I'm just really worried. She was like, you're going to have such a hard life. I think everyone can agree, TERF or not, it's not fun being trans. You are literally going to be like, oh, it's gonna cry, I'm such a crybaby, but like it's so hard. I get catcalled every day. Like, I was spat on the face on the tube. This is the analogy I always use, is like, if you're on a tube and a trans person gets on, are you thinking that they're going to attack you? Or are you going to be looking at them thinking, oh God, I hope that person doesn't get attacked? You know that they're going to be the ones getting attacked, not attacking. So I'm just like, where is this notion of us being the bullies, you know? And it's wild to see how in the flip of a switch, we've gone from being the joke that literally like, haha, trans person and tranny, to being like, oh, they're so scary. It's like, what? You're the ones who's scaring us.
Media Storm, the award-winning investigative podcast from the House of the Guilty Feminist, will be back next week with an investigation into the gendered impact of humanitarian crises.